Hi, Nicole, you're here early.
Pueden hacer clic abajo donde dice interpretación, interpretation, y escoger español o portugués si quieren escuchar la reunión en su idioma preferido. When Sonia comes back on, I will have her do the Portuguese interpretation of that short message. Great. So I would like to call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. I will first call the roll, starting with Glenda Liz Colon.
Present.
Andrew Bramson.
Present.
Rosa Martinez.
Present.
Hugo Figueroa.
Present.
Sonia Grace is going to join us a little bit late. We do have a quorum. So to move, the first item on the agenda will be the consideration of the meeting minutes of January 14th.
Madam Chair, if I could just interrupt,
yes.
you forgot Bryant on the
oh my gosh,
attendance.
Brian, I'm sorry.
Wait,
I am so sorry. That was not intentional. I'm sorry. For some reason, I glossed over you. So Brian, just going back to I just want to make a note in the record that Brian Estrada is here.
President. I just blended in with the.
Sorry about that. So the next item on the agenda is the consideration of the meeting minutes of January 14th, 2021. So I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Brian Estrada. Second. Seconded
Second.
by Andrew Bramson. Do we have any questions or comments on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the meeting minutes of January 14th have been approved. I do see that Dr. McDonald is on, so I think we can just continue with the agenda as is. So welcome, Dr. McDonald and Captain Erica Morga from the National Guard. They are joining us today to just tell us a little bit more about the testing site and the treatment site at Calcutt Middle School, which I know that has sparked a lot of questions in the community. And this was our, after discussing with Dr. Toledo, we felt like this was a good way to be responsive to some of the questions and inquiries that have been coming up. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. Toledo, if you want to do a deeper introduction, or however you want to proceed with this agenda item. Welcome, both of you.
Great. I will, in fact, do a bit more of an introduction, though I think you did cover. Whoop. There we go. Okay. So I'm very grateful that our two guests could spend some time with us this evening. I want to introduce to you a face that may be familiar because he is often sharing updates on COVID. Dr. McDonald from the Rhode Island Department of Health, and he has served with the Department of Health since 2012 as the Chief Administrative Officer. He is taken the lead in so many important initiatives and has offered to be here tonight to talk about the ways that the COVID treatment and testing site at Calcutt is serving the community. And then joined by Dr. McDonald is Captain Erica Morga, who is a nurse practitioner with the Rhode Island National Guard and serving in that treatment team at Calcutt. And so just want to thank them both for their leadership and all the work they're doing through the pandemic, and for sharing with the community tonight a little bit more about what is happening and in that side of Calcutt that we have offered to the National Guard and the Department of Health. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. McDonald.
Yeah, thank you so much for the warm introduction, and it's fun to be with you tonight. As you might be able to tell, I'm coming to you live from my dining room tonight. So if you hear Daisy or Rosebud or the sound of children or kitchen noises, that's just because you're in the dining room, my friends. So, and that's part of life in the pandemic. And I kind of want to just open with a couple of thoughts. We've been very worried about Central Falls for a long time, and it's partly because there's just been so many cases there. And, we've done some things as best we could to help Central Falls. But one of the things that we really have just tried to think about, like, it's not just about getting masks to people in Central Falls. It's not just about getting vaccine to people in Central Falls. It's really like, what do we do about testing and what do we do about treatment? And one of the things that we've learned from folks who were there, literally boots on ground, and I mean literally boots on ground, was that a lot of folks in Central Falls didn't feel comfortable leaving Central Falls to go get treatment. And one of the things that's interesting about COVID-19 is, and this is just sort of interesting, because of when it happened, COVID-19 became a treatable disease, but it just didn't really get national attention. And part of it had to do with when that news was released. It was during November, early December. And for those of you who were living in the United States, like me, or like, everything was about the presidential election. So you couldn't get into the news cycle unless you were the presidential election or vaccine. And the story about treatment just didn't really catch on. Now we've gotten some local traction with local media lately, but the treatment we're talking about are monoclonal antibodies. And monoclonal antibodies are antibodies that are made in a pharmaceutical laboratory, and they're specifically against the virus SARS-CoV-2. So it really gives somebody an instant immune system. Because normally what happens is, if I get infected with the virus, what my body needs to do is, one, recognize their infection, two, make antibodies, and three, I better hope this has occurred before I've had the inflammatory reaction. So if I have that inflammatory reaction, that's the folks who end up in the hospital. So the monoclonal antibody treatment is really targeted towards people who haven't been in the hospital. Now, it was authorized by the Food Drug Administration back in early November under what's called emergency use authorization. There's two companies that make a product. One's called Lilly. They've been around forever. They've made things like penicillin and insulin. So they've been around forever. The other company is Regeneron, which is a more newer pharmaceutical company, but this is what they do. And part of what I'm saying is, it's an intravenous infusion. So in order to give someone a monoclonal antibody, you have to have them sit in a chair and put something in their veins for an hour. Then you follow them for another hour. So it's literally once and done. You're treated once. But the way it works is, and this is where the infrastructure that we developed in Rhode Island was a little quicker than other states. Because one, you got to get a positive test on somebody. Two, you have to have the person see a doctor right away. And then three, you got to get them a place where they're COVID positive, but they can get this IV drug infused, and then they have to go home. It turns out that's a lot of infrastructure we had to build. So in Rhode Island, we've got a lot of infusion sites. Rhode Island Hospital came on board, Miriam, the Cranston Field Hospital, Kent, Charter Care, Landmark, Wesley came on board, AtMed came on board recently. So we've got a lot of infusion sites. But one of the things we really saw as a barrier was, in places that were harder hit, like Pawtucket and Central Falls, we weren't really seeing people leave those communities to get the treatment for a host of reasons. And the captain can talk about that in just a moment. So the idea was, how do we bring the treatment to you? So Calcutt School was a place we're using. We had the National Guard people do an inspection of it, make sure the place was an appropriate facility, make sure the air supply was separate, which it is. And then we could actually move COVID positive people in there safely, where there's no risk to anybody else. And then the folks who are there have personal protective equipment. We have a physician who happens to be in the National Guard, Dr. Guzman is there, can do the evaluation. And we actually have the drug there that we can do an IV infusion. So it's really a nice setup in that regard, because we're trying to bring the treatment to where we want it the quickest and make it less barriers for people so they're more likely. Why do we care about this? And I think this is really the important point. One is, what does the monoclonal antibody really do for people? By giving you an instant immune system, you do get better quicker. By the way, this is stuff that President Trump and famous people had before it was, emergency use authorized. But it gets people so they don't go in the hospital. If we keep people out of the hospital, they're less likely to, of course, not die, and that's important. But we need, one, people get better quicker. Two, we can't keep our hospitals full like this. So we don't have a lot of data just yet, but in the research that got the emergency use authorization, this population, about 10% of the people in the group were ending up in the hospital, and it was down to 3%. One of the things we're seeing in some of the data we're seeing at Rhode Island Hospital is they're seeing it's about 1%. So it's a little bit, it's similar and a little bit better. And the point I'm making is the monoclonal antibody is not allowed for everybody. Now, part of that's because we don't have an infinite amount, but we have plenty right now. But it's really what the research showed. The people who did the best were the people who were 65 and older, anybody with symptoms with mild to moderate disease, they're good to go, they can get treatment. Some people are 55 and older with some cardiovascular disease, they're good to go. And then there's some younger people who have some problems and they can get it as well, but they've got to have some high risk conditions. Maybe their immune system doesn't work so well. So it's really what we're trying to do is keep people out of the hospital. And that was the intention of doing it. Captain, let me ask you to fill in a little bit more though. You've been over there, you've done quite a bit. So Captain, why don't you fill in a little bit that I left out there, please?
Sure. So the big thing that the Rhode Island Air National Guard did was see that there was a need in this population. And we wanted to bring the treatment, like Dr. McDonald said, to that area so that patients can get the treatment that they need. And right, as you guys are all probably aware, there was testing already being done at Calcut in the gymnasium, and it's just like a perfect setup so that we can get the patient, we get the test results the same day. The patients sit around and wait, and then after that, they end up speaking to someone called a contact investigator, and then that contact investigator goes over those risk factors, identifies people who may or may not qualify, who may qualify, may not, but who will qualify for the treatment. And then our doctor, and we have alert ambulance also at the treatment site, who is there helping screen these patients to see if they truly qualify for the medication. And Dr. Guzman is our physician from the Rhode Island Air National Guard, who actually is also an internal medicine physician and has an office in the community. She's bilingual. She was the best person for Calcut, but she talks to the patient, she explains everything to them, and then when they move from the gym to the science room, it's literally like a little U-turn. We know that before we needed to make sure that, patient flow was really important, and we checked ventilation. So with the Rhode Island Air National Guard to help with safety measures is we created zones, and it's kind of technical, but we created like hot zones, right? Hot zones, warm zones, and cold zones. And the hot zone is very, very limited to right outside the gymnasium and then inside the classroom. There's no other, like the patients don't go anywhere else except for those three areas. So from the gymnasium into the little hallway that's blocked off, and it's currently has actually three little barriers, if you will, so that people cannot come in and out through there. Only authorized personnel can go in and out. The patient then goes into the classroom, and then the nurse starts an IV and gives the infusion, which lasts about an hour. And then after that, they wait around another hour for monitoring, making sure that they tolerated the medication okay. And then they leave from that classroom. There's a door that's designated only for those patients. So they're not able to go through the rest of the school. So they're just kind of doing like a little U-turn, which I'm sure you guys know the school. So I'm sure you're like familiar with what I'm talking about. So they just leave through that back door, and they don't go through the rest of the school at all. So the big thing too is that to ensure the safety of staff and faculty and the on-site treatment team and testing team, we did an air quality test, and that demonstrated an air change per hour of about 6.9. The CDC recommends 2, and so we exceeded that air change per hour. And what that means is that 99% of the particles are removed from that room. And so after 2 hours, right now we have, it's called a Medify HEPA filter inside the treatment room. And that filter is part of that air exchange as well. So within 2 hours, the room will have had 99% of all airborne pathogens removed from that room. So after the day, like when the treatment team comes back in the following morning, it's no longer considered a hot zone. So they don't have to wear the PPE that you normally have to wear when you're treating COVID positive patients. Our Rhode Island Air National Guard members, they did the testing. They did a survey. They checked the ducts. It has its own sort of ventilation system where they take air out. It doesn't circulate at all throughout the rest of the school. So we've just gone through extra lengths to really be careful and to make sure that, you know, safety was always our #1 priority for both the patients and the staff.
Thank you both so much. Chair Gonzalez, do you or the board have questions?
Yeah, thank you for joining us. That it was, you know, it's one thing to sort of hear it be described initially, but I think having you both here as individuals who are seeing this day in and out, I think is really helpful for us to really conceptualize that, how it's working a little bit more. So thank you for being here. I did want to open it up for board members. If anyone has any questions about what you heard or anything that's been, you know, on your mind in this past week around the treatment center and the testing site, the
I have a
testing
question.
and treatment site. Yes, Diosa, go ahead.
I just would like to know how successful that has been in the community, like how many people really have gone to have treatment over there, if you have a number.
I do. So 13 on the first, we started last Monday on the 25th. We did 13 patients in the first week. And I'm thinking we're probably going to exceed that this week. I know that I think we're already up to maybe 8 or 9 today. I don't want to say for certain, but it's been a significantly more since last week, but we also missed a day because we weren't doing infusions on Monday because of the weather. But we've been seeing an uptick in actually doing infusions every day.
Thank you. That's great.
Yes, we're excited.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions?
Um,
Glenda Lee?
oh,
Oh, sorry, Glenda. I'll have Glenda go and then Brian.
Okay, I have a question. One of the concerns I heard was the visual, like what is the visual that my child is going to have when they walk in the school building from their main entrance? Are they going to be seeing guards walking around? Does this look like a hospital? I just want to know if you can debunk all the myths that are out there, and how safe you feel it is for our parents to know if it's safe for them to send their child to the school.
Sure. So in terms of the optics of it, when the children come into school, and now I'm not really familiar with like where exactly they come in, but I'm assuming it's by like where the principal and where they can buzz people in. Yeah. Okay. So when they come in that way, if you walk straight ahead is the cafeteria. There's other double doors that go towards the gymnasium in that classroom. That's where you can't see anything. Like it's all blocked off from that point on. There's a plastic barrier and it's a zipper. You have to have PPE on. There's and then on the other side too, when you come out of the gymnasium, when you're going to go to the classroom, on that side as well, there's plastic barriers. So from my perspective, there's nothing that anyone can see from the gym and the treatment room at all. And they're not allowed to go, like any of the patients, they're not allowed to go and wander throughout the school.
And I have one last question before Brian goes. There's a lot of commentary about hazardous waste material. Where is that located? If you can give us perhaps the optics and, give us some more information around that as well.
Oh, sure. So I heard about this as well. And I think so that hazardous waste was from testing. It's not at all from the treatment team whatsoever. Alert Ambulance has their own way of disposing hazardous waste, and it's supposed to be disposed of in a certain way, which is why it was probably building up in the hallway, because it has to be disposed properly or else there's a huge fine associated with that. So it's the same exact waste that the teachers and students are going to be producing when they're doing testing, when they start school back up. So that has been taken care of. There's no longer hazardous waste in the hallway. I was assured that by the treatment team, but that is from the testing side. It is not from the treatment side.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Hi. So there's I guess one main thing I'm wondering. So this has been going on, you said, for like about a week now, right?
Yes.
And I'm wondering in regards to, so you've had 13 patients in the first week that have gotten the infusions, right? What's the next steps? So are y'all doing like community follow-up with the people who got the treatment? Is that Rido's job? What's the plan? What's those next steps? And then I'll have a follow-up based on that.
Okay, so right now what's happening with that is that Dr. Guzman, the physician on site, she's personally calling each patient and following up to see how symptoms are, if they ended up, if they're getting better, if they're getting worse, if they had any reactions to the medications, and things like that. So there is very, very close follow-up after the infusion.
Okay. And the second part is, I'm just thinking like in regards to the efforts that have been put in place in the city with in regards to like vaccinations and how that alongside with this is gonna like work with one another. I don't know if what I'm asking makes sense, but I'm just thinking like, the folks who would be the first to go to the hospital because of X, Y, and Z reasons are hopefully the ones that were getting vaccinated, right? And we all know that it's like the 95% chance. So I'm just trying to get an idea on like how, if there's any kind of interaction between the two that are doing both efforts or what that may look like, I guess, in the future.
Sure. I can't really speak. Maybe Dr. McDonald would know more information than I know that there are efforts being championed in terms of getting vaccinations in the Central Falls area. To my understanding, there's nothing of that plan. Obviously I'm not always in the know, but I don't know of any vaccination plan to have it at Calcut. That's not, and we definitely want to, separate it from that, but there are already efforts underway in Central Falls for vaccination. And Dr. McDonald, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, generally we try to, thank you, Captain. Yeah, generally the vaccination sites are separate from treatment sites, generally speaking. Having said that, Brian, just to make sure, there's always an exception to everything, right? So if you were to go to Saconaset, you would see vaccination going on at Saconaset right across from Whole Foods. But it's also the same complex as where we have the Cranston Field Hospital and where they're doing monoclonal antibody infusions. However, there's separate entrances, and this is a huge campus. There's separate airflow. So it's like, I've been to both. I got a tour of the Saconaset Rhode Island National Guard site Tuesday night. Captain Barrett was nice enough to walk me around and see the vaccine thing. It's completely separate from the hospital part of it and where the people are getting. So, and part of what I think is important here is, Captain used terms like hot zone, warm zone, cold zone. And I don't know if those words mean, but hot zone means that's where there's people who are COVID positive. Cold zone means there's nobody who's COVID positive in those zones. So these are designations you use in facilities so people can understand where is your infectious risk higher, because when you're in a hot zone, you need to be wearing personal protective equipment. When you're in a cold zone, you don't need to be. And then there's that warm zone where people are usually taking off or, doing, there's a little bit of a mixture there. So people have, and part of why you make those distinctions in facilities is to protect everybody who's working there. And they're very clear what are these distinctions. So there isn't really a plan to make, and that's a long way to say we don't generally mix vaccination sites and treatment sites. We don't generally mix. I gave you the one exception so you would know that.
So I think what I asked was like a little confusing. What more of what I was wondering was in regards to the future of the city, right? And now that we have this treatment center, and now that we're also getting vaccinations, so I'm not saying like in the same place. I'm just saying in general, like community, thinking like the future of this, also keeping in mind that, and hopefully like I don't know what I feel like it's one of those questions that's pretty up here and there's probably not going to be an answer to, but I'm thinking like the long-term plan based on that.
Well, there will be more vaccination sites across the state. Like, I mean, the CVS and Walgreens, there's going to be 16 more sites open up next week at various pharmacies. Walgreens got 14 other pharmacies in play. CVS has 2 with more CVS sites coming on next week. So there's definitely going to be more vaccination sites. This is one of the things you're going to see across the state over the next few weeks. As more vaccine becomes available, there's more and more places that are going to be vaccinating. Pharmacies are going to be the places that people see come online first, though, because it's just easier to distribute to them and they can store the vaccine.
Great, thank you for that. I don't know if Andrew, Sonia, or Ugo have any questions before I go back to you, Glenda. Just want to make sure everyone gets a chance. Okay, Glenda.
Yeah, my last question is probably more towards, well, both Captain Morga and Dr. Toledo. Seeing as we have a goal to fully open, if that's the plan, coming March, how long is the site going to be there? Is it going to be there when we hopefully all go back to school? What does the long-term goal look like?
So I can first share that it's definitely something that we've committed to having a continuous conversation, and that it's really driven on community need. So, we're the National Guard and RIDO shares with us, sort of updates on how many people are getting tested each week. And now to know that the infusions are actually increasing, I think we'll take it week by week. I know I've been staying in close touch with Mayor Rivera, who I think will ultimately make these decisions with the National Guard and with the Department of Health, and certainly in consultation with the district. But if there's a need in the community, we want to help meet it. The plan for third quarter at Calcut was to have health during that PE time already, whether the gym was available or not. So that would be one difference for kids. And certainly if the weather's warm, we're also looking at alternatives to get them outside and moving. But I would just say it's going to be a continuous conversation based on the community need. Captain Morga, any other thoughts on that?
No, that's exactly, because I don't really have, it's based on whatever you guys you're telling us that you want us to be there, so.
All right. Any final thoughts or any final questions for Captain Morga or Dr. McDonald? Okay, well, thank you so much again for joining us at our meeting. We know it was kind of a last minute ask, so I'm very, very appreciative of you giving of your time to just help us think through this a little bit more and understand exactly what is happening in one of our school buildings, especially as we start to bring in more students into the building. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having me. You guys have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to item 4, it's titled Student Presentation, and just to give some context, I had the amazing opportunity, and I think maybe some of you on the board, other board members did too, and I know a lot of administrators were on this as well, had the chance to attend a conversation with the author Jenny Sanchez Torres, I believe, who is the author of We Are Not From Here, a text that was assigned by Jordana Rogeri, our 9th grade English teacher, that really, I'm going to let them do the talking about what the book was about, but it was just an amazing depiction of the struggles, the hardship, the real heartbreak of children who migrate to this country. And so after joining that class, Jordana and I stayed in touch, and I invited her to join us just so we get a taste of some of the amazing work that she is doing with her students. And her students our students are with us today to tell us a little bit more about that experience and what they learned from being able to engage with the author and to read the text. And so I'm going to hand it over to you, Jordana, and to the students. So I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it right over to the students. I will share the screen, and they are fully in charge of this presentation. It's all them. Can you see my screen? Is it?
Yeah, I see it.
We can see the screen.
There you go. It's you, Elijah.
Okay. Hello, my name is Elijah Nunez. I am from Miss Ruggieri's honors class. We did a portfolio task on the book We Are Not From Here by Jenny Torres Sanchez. And yeah, the book is about a couple of kids who are looking to immigrate from Guatemala to America because their surroundings have not been pleasant. Poga has his dreams, Chico has his grief, and Pequeña has her pride. These three teens have one another, but none of them have illusions about the town they've grown up in and the dangers that surround them. Even with the love of family, threats lurk around every corner. And when those threats become all too real, the trio knows that they have no choice but to run. From their country, from their families, from their beloved home. Crossing from Guatemala through Mexico, they follow the route of La Bestia, the perilous train system that might deliver them to a better life if they are lucky enough to survive the journey. With nothing but the bags on their backs and desperation drumming through their hearts, Poga, Chico, and Pequeña know there is no turning back, despite the unknown that awaits them, and the darkness that seems to follow wherever they go. Skill/I can statements. As we read and listened to the novel, we focused on the below skills and had to demonstrate our understanding by applying these skills into our writing. I can use precise, descriptive words and sensory language to develop vivid images of experience, events, settings, and characters. I can identify words that impact meaning and tone. I can use figurative language to develop vivid images of experiences, events, settings, and characters. I can analyze how characters change over the course of the text. I can determine a character's traits. I can use strong and thorough textual evidence.
Chris, are you ready?
Good evening. My name is Christopher Protomordan. On December 7th, my classmates and I had the amazing opportunity to ask questions with Johnny Terra Sanchez about her amazing novel. The experience was incredible.
Good evening, my name is Sofia Santos. In order to demonstrate our skills and development, we were given 4 choices for our final project. Writing a letter to the author, creating an original symbol, creating a photo essay, and creating an original song or rap. In which option we chose, we had to apply the ELA skills that we learned in our writing to demonstrate proficiency. I selected to write a letter because I felt like I could express my understanding of this book with words rather than symbols or pictures. I also decided to write a letter because I wanted to let Miss Sanchez know that I can identify myself with her book. To me, this book represents a deeper meaning of being born in a life where you have to seek every opportunity you can get. This book shows the dark side of what it takes to reach dreams.
Good evening. My name is Cladira Correa, and um, I chose to write the letter to to express my feeling and understanding of the book. I wanted Mrs. Sanchez to know that I was very grateful, and thanks to her writing, I learned how to express my feelings through words. It was my first time seeing someone write such emotions. Um, the book taught me to write in figurative language. I'm I'm very grateful to have an unbelievable opportunity to ask you a question about.
I decided to write the letter to Miss Sanchez because it was a way to express myself and to thank her because of the amazing book she wrote. It was a really nice experience reading it because I have learned about this topic before, but I never got really into it. And when I was reading through the book, I saw how there's people that don't born with the same opportunities as others, and they need to make the impossible to survive in this cruel world. This book taught me that there's good people, but that there's also such as terrible people that can do worse things to others.
Hello, my name is Victor Lahara. I wrote this letter to um express my emotions through this book and how it like meant to me. It encouraged me um to write about it, to like actually learn about migration and everything. It also made me feel like more it gave me like a lesson of being more appreciative of what you have because I know other kids around the world don't have like we have to take a long journey to come over here so that they can witness what we're having right now, a good time and everything. So it's like makes me sad. So that's why I wrote it so I can express how it makes me feel and how it hopes makes everybody feel so that they can have a good time.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Martinez. Option two was creating an original symbol for one of the characters in the novel. In order to do this, we had to think deeply about the character and their traits. By learning characterization, we were able to see how characters changed and developed through the story. Each part of the original symbol Each part of our original symbol had to symbolize an aspect of the character. We had to write and explain and each part of our symbol meant, the colors we chose, and connect them to the aspect of the character's personality. In our writing, we needed to use strong word choices, imaginary descriptive language, and identify character traits with evidence from the text.
My symbol is displayed on the right. I chose Pequeña because she was like the figure in the group that held them together. She was like the glue. She got them through the tough things that happened on their trip to immigrate to America. What I wrote was the waves represent the dreams of floor. The floor is Pequeña's real name, has revealed later in the book, and how they swept her away. Like the tide coming in and out with its gentle sound as it breaks on the shore. Floor clinging tightly to the wet, majestic wave to make it to the land of dreams. Her holding on to herself and to who she really is and the ones she cares about. The silver wings represent La Bruja, which was reoccurring character in this book that Pequeña used to dream about when she was having hard times, a way to escape the reality of her fate. Flora's guardian angel. They represent her hair and her rescuing Flora from dark phase. Our silver hair glimmers like gray diamonds in the darkest times, shining light on a grim fate. The clock represents Flora's patience and understanding. Here, she whispers, offering some food. I turn away from her. I don't want any food. I don't want anything. You don't want to hear her. You should eat something, she insists, but I ignore her. I don't want to hear her voice or eat the bread, or wait for that beast that doesn't want to leave. She offers the bread again, and I push her hand away. Stop. Don't be mad at me, Bulga. That excerpt from the book is after one of their friends had passed, so he was crushed by it. So he was just in a bad place. But even as he was smacking stuff away from her and just being rude, she understood and she didn't get mad. She just carried on calmly.
Hi, my name is Nicolas Garcia, and I chose Pulga because I like Pulga, and I chose the lion because it represents like bravery and the when he was on the train, and the circles represent loyalty for Pequeña and Chico, and yeah.
I chose to draw my own symbol, and to the right you can see my what I drew. In this drawing, I tried to capture as much as I can about Pequeña. Um, I drew a flower behind her because in the last words that Pequeña said, well, her character said in the book were, and I see inside my chest, dark and empty, but I see a glow come from a small space within that glows brighter and brighter. It's a flower bud, and I watch it as it opens up and luminous petals unfurl, taking more space, filling my chest with life, with hope. And I really connected with Pequeña because she goes through a lot in this book, and yet she had hope to keep going. And I think like everyone deals with different things, but in this book, Pequeña was able to get through what she went through because of hope, and I just thought that that was really important. So the flower bottle, the flowers and the yellow and the spreading behind her is her hope and how she's like growing past it, and then she's looking forward as a way to symbolize how she's like moving forward.
Hi, my name's Carlene, and for my symbol, I chose to do a like a wilting rose in front of um a pink background and a black sun. The wilting rose is to symbolize purity and virginity, and since she was raped and her purity was taken from her, forcing by force, and the flower is now wilting because of that. And the colors white and gray indicates timidness and emptiness, which describes her personality and her being distraught from getting impregnated by being raped. And the sun is her solution to immigrate to America, and the color black is to indicate the problem, and the pink background is to indicate the femininity and beautiness, because in the book it describes her as really pretty and feminine, and the gang leader calls her beautiful because of that. And the he like talks about how feminine her body is and how she's really pretty and gorgeous.
Hi, my name is Naomi Delgado Pedraza. I chose to represent the character of Pequeña with a phoenix bird. The reason I chose a phoenix is because it is the symbol of resilience. Pequeña is a very resilient character because she goes through numerous amounts of hardships like being raped, having a baby, and leaving her family and home, and yet she remains strong throughout the story. The phoenix burns into ashes at its weakest point, but rises from the ashes stronger than before, just like Pequeña. The phoenix is gray to represent maturity. We Are Not From Here made a great impact on me because it showed the journey that migrants go through and all the struggles that they have. It showed me another side of migrant story that we don't frequently hear.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alondra Santos Gorines, and I chose to create a photo essay, and I had to tell a story of a migrant's journey. Just like Pulga, Pequeña, and Chico, I looked for pictures to not only tell their story, but also to capture the many emotions that migrants face. For each picture, I told a part of their story by using descriptive language, strong word choice, figurative language, and imagery. I was able to convey hope and the fear that migrants face every day trying to achieve a better life. What impacted me the most about this was hearing all of the ugly incidents that were happening in their beloved homes. They couldn't live, sleep, or even breathe in peace because they always had to be cautious of their surroundings, and no one should have to feel that way in the place they call home.
I've seen all those days of desperation and holding tight, of the fighting and never stopping, all the nights of crying and fearing and starving and not caring, all of the sacrificing and dying. It's really happening. It's all of it. To me, to us, to all of those in cages. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I first want to say I am so grateful that you all took time of your evening to come join us at this meeting and to be vulnerable with your work, to display it for the over 100 people attending this meeting currently, and to express the emotions that you felt while reading this novel. And I'm sorry, I have a little one who's giving me some trouble here, but I wanna open it up to board members. We don't typically have an agenda item like this in our meetings, and I want this to become a little bit more regular because too often I think we're stuck in this sort of big picture, high level policy work when I think the real important critical work that's happening is in our classrooms with teachers like Jordana and with students like all of you. And so I want to just open it up for board members. If you have comments, questions, would love, the students are here to answer them, and just would love to hear your reactions. Thank you all so much.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just would like to know if this novel was working on in a particular class, or if this can become like part of some of the classes that is in Central Falls High School, because I know that this is the story of many of the students in Central Falls. So, and I think that me, myself, as a social worker, I have worked with kids from Guatemala that have experienced terrible stuff, and that I've been in charge of looking for treatment for them because it's been so overwhelmed for this kid to live that kind of experience. So I think that if we can have like a forum where those kids can express their experience and the trauma and the way that they cope with this, I think will be a great thing. Because I know firsthand that we have a lot of those kids that can identify with this novel. That's my comment.
Thank you, Diosa. Glenda Lee.
I completely agree, Diosa. I actually bought my book. I read it. This book, and that's why I second Diosa, because it truly represents. When I read it, I felt like I was hearing one of my neighbor's stories, another parent's story, a relative story, the story of my mother traveling here. It's just, we relate to it so much. And I'd like to ask the students, did they feel the same way that this represented our community, their own families? That's what touched me the most. And really, I'm so touched listening to the students and their presentation. That was phenomenal. And you guys make me so proud. I appreciate it so much, and thank you.
My name is Nancy Martinez, and I wanted to respond to you saying, did we connect? Well, at least in my part, I am the daughter. Well, I was born here, and I can say that I didn't have to pass by any of those things, but I connected to it because I'm the daughter of 2 immigrant parents, and they are so hardworking because they went through what they went through, and they still have the courage to keep going. And I have heard parts of their stories, but I haven't really been able to like see something like that really be expressed until I read this book, where it was pretty, like, they explained it so well, like what really happens. And they, in many stories or in many articles, you can see like on the news, it will always tell you something, but you will never really connect. You wouldn't really feel it the way it came out from the story. So that's my response.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Anyone else have thoughts or questions?
I just want to say I'm really impressed. I mean, so I'm a high school teacher, and just seeing the work that y'all put in, it's amazing, right? Like, and it does take, and I think Stephanie said this, but it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of bravery to actually put yourself out there with your work. And wow, I am super impressed. I actually, just hearing about the book too, and hearing your explanations and your thoughts and your feelings and emotions around it, I already added it to my Amazon wish list. So the next time I can get it shipped to my house, I will. So awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions? I can't see everyone on my screen, so if you're just raising your hand, I just can't see you. All right. Well, again, I want to say thank you to Jordana. I know she put herself in the background and really let the kids shine. But I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't give you a shout out for one, intentionally introducing a book like this in your classroom, right? That matters, and also for allowing us to share in this space and in this conversation with you and the students. So I will end it there. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to offer. If not, oh, go ahead.
I know, I just wanted to say that you students did phenomenal. You guys are amazing. But also back to what Miss Martinez had said and what Linda Lease had said, I've been talking to Mr. Lehman regarding this book, and going forward, it would happen so fast this year, but just to kind of bridge that that divide sometimes that there is within the school of ESL, of newcomers, and mainstream students, and even the students as they were reading, it was just this awakening that the Pulga, Pequeña, and Chico were actually in our building, and students that are in our building went through this journey and endured this. So moving forward, we would like to kind of partner up to hear those real stories from our students, and it's coming out in, I believe, May in Spanish. So hopefully, then we can really do something with it next year. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's great to have you. Okay, it's kind of hard to like unplug from that presentation and try to do like actual business of the board, but here we are moving on to item 5, which is a consideration of personnel actions, including any new appointments, layoffs, rescissions, resignations, recalls, and retirements. Item 5A is a non-renewal. Dr. Toledo, I will pass it over to you, or to, sorry. I will pass it over to you to just walk us through the memo, or if you wanted to add anything on the memo.
So the memo is quite short this month, just one resignation. And that's the only action there. And then separately, do you want me to also talk about the non-renewal now, or do you want to?
I think we can, I mean, we're only acknowledging receipt of the HR memo now. We're not voting on it. So I think, if I'll sort of pause and ask if any other board members have questions on the HR memo.
Yes.
Go ahead, Hugo.
Is Peggy taking his place, or
Can you say that one more time?
is Peggy taking his place, or I know he's coming back, so I just want to know if he's taking his place.
He will be coming back, and I think those courses will. So that particular science teacher you're referencing, Mr. Peggy, will have his own courses. So we actually have posted for a science teacher, and do have some candidates to replace the person who resigned. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none. So just as a reminder to board members and to others, we're not approving the HR memo. This is really a communication from the HR director and Dr. Toledo on HR changes and things that are happening. And so going forward, we're just acknowledging it. We're acknowledging receipt of this on board. We're not taking an official vote or anything on it. Moving on to item 5A, which is non-renewal. I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Toledo.
Sure. So just as a reminder, there's a process at the February board meeting. Each year before March 1st, we do need to notify any teacher who we do not plan to renew, a non-tenured teacher who we don't plan to renew. And so in your packet, there is a letter stating that there is one teacher who in this case, I'm putting forward to the board, recommending that individual's non-renewal due to the belief that we could find a more skilled, better person to fit the role. I'm being intentionally vague, obviously, for anonymity, but the letter is in your packet.
Great. I will entertain a motion to approve the non-renewal.
So
actually, let me take that back. I will entertain a motion to uphold the superintendent's recommendation for non-renewal.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Hugo Figueroa, and now we can have a discussion. Or if there are questions. Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the non-renewal, we have upheld the superintendent's recommendation for non-renewal. The next item on the agenda is item 6, which is the Central Falls School District budget. Consideration of bill, grants, and general budget is item 6A. Sonia or Dr. Toledo, do you have comments or thoughts on that?
No
Standard
comments. I made the review of the monthly bills and everything was fine.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion was made by Andrew Bramson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Brian Estrada. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Item 6B is FY21 budget review update and discussion. I believe I will pass it on to Director Simmons.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Doc, you got me? Well, good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Central Falls community, the students, the residents, the workers, and all the well wishers. So tonight is a facsimile or snapshot of where we are as of now, and that would be January 31st. It's a month-to-month update. So what you see in front of you is basically, I kind of try to change it to maybe it might appeal to others more this way than just seeing numbers, but to actually see the trend of income and expenses. So this is a snapshot of our expenditures for the remainder of the year. You can see up top, the blue, that is that salaries, and what goes right underneath that is benefits. So it's pretty much consistent with the number of payrolls per month. The expenditures that are going to increase, that I'm, hoping we can keep a pulse on. And before I continue, I also want to thank my team, Manny Ray, the accountant, Juan Taveras, the grant manager, Sandra Gamont, over payroll, and Sue Garvey over accounts payable, because they're doing a fabulous job and they're helping us to maintain a solid workflow, as well as monitoring our revenue and expenditures. So getting back to it, the expenditures that are going to hit our books that did not hit our books for the first half of the year because of the CARES funding is going to be additional cleaning in the schools, as well as substitutes. So I'm hoping, and what we're trying to do is to keep our pulse on that, and we're working diligently in belief that the reserves we had set up to account for those expenditures, knowing that the CARES money would run out, was adequate. We're still looking forward to towards a balanced budget. Next slide, please. So expenditures are always what we don't want to see, but this is what we do want to see, right? The revenue, how well are we doing? We can see that throughout the course of the year, as beginning of the year, we had to pay back funds to ride for the CARES. We've already gone over that, so I won't spend much time on that. But you can see an uptick in our monthly state aid from 2.9 to 3.2 to about 3.7 for the remainder of the year. And that's because the House finally passed the budget. RIDE is paying us in arrears for what wasn't funded with that 2.9 million. And so as we end off the year, as I said, on the expenditure side, while we expect our custodial cost and our substitute cost to go up, it will be offset by our revenue going up, which is why I say I believe we can end off this year with a balanced budget, and ideally move towards talks later on. And when I say later, I'm talking about like May, June, as the sun begins to set on the year, in terms of whether or not we can come out of this with a fund balance. But I really don't want to look too far out. I want to kind of deal with this month to month, kind of do the run rate of how the last 3 months have been, and project 2 months out, and we'll see from there. But I feel pretty good about where we are right now as a district. Next slide. So, and this is the actual closing slide. Just to reiterate that, the CARES Act, in and of itself hasn't ended, but our funding stream or funding sources, main ones, have come to a close. And that's because we used it, not because the funds could not extend time, but we've actually used it. We've used our 1.5 of ESSER and our 1.8 of the supplemental aid on a number of things, most of it being technology to support the students and HVAC work to make sure that there's clean air being filtered throughout the district for those who are in person or those who are to come back in person. There is another part of CARES that I had more hope for. I try not to count dollars before they're in the bank because that's a very easy and quick way towards a deficit. So sometimes I have to play hardball with the team and say, no, we can't do that yet. And I'm glad because the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which I knew was part of CARES, that did hit the governor's table. I had a talk with RIDE, and the main funding that we will receive from that right now is focused on the expansion of the pre-K program. So we don't have an amount for that yet. I don't have many details behind that, but in terms of a continuation of what I was hoping along the ESSER and the supplemental impact education aid, that's what it's not going to be. So, so for some key takeaways, one, as aforementioned, we're en route to a balanced budget. Takeaway number two, we're negotiating our ask for FY22. So just that, you know, so everyone knows, so that, you know, it's not it's not what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? A surprise. You know, RIDE does look very vigilantly at our enrollment numbers, and they're looking even as this distance learning is going on. And so they kind of took our enrollment numbers from our what they built the FY22 budget off of, I want to say last year, and they looked at our enrollment numbers now, and there is a decrease, and Dr. Toledo talked about that during our last meeting. And they basically asked me, they said, well, if we are going to base it off of what the enrollment was versus what it is, please tell me how you're going to use that funding. If the basically is going to follow the student, there are less students, why do you need this additional funding? So I was able to work with the team and to talk about just, you know, some of the basic needs around the district that, you know, COVID still does exist. We still have to do reconfiguration for our classes. Talked about hiring a psychologist for the social and emotional well-being of students and faculty. Maybe we might be able to do two, one for faculty, one for students, if it comes to that, not knowing what type of environment we're going to be in, as well as the cleaning that will have to happen above and beyond a normal fiscal year. So those were our three asks to retain and to keep the funding. I do want to say one more thing, going back to Dr. Toledo had mentioned last month about the 46 million and whether or not that included the title funds. And, you know, I kept asking myself, because she's very sharp in terms of what was she thinking or referring to. And what it is that part of that 46 million, it's not the title fund or it's not the title grants that are in that, but it is the pre-K, the state pre-K grant, which typically is about 1.3 to 1.5 million. So if you go 46 million minus the 1.3 to 1.5, you're talking about, you know, 44.5 or 45 or 44.7 million. So I think that is what we all were referring to. So lastly, our economic outlook for FY21 and FY22. Myself, as well as the other business managers in the state, we're hoping that that the newer administration in Washington will put out additional relief for the schools. I know I want to say President Biden's plan is several trillion, and the other side is working on billions. And however that filters down to our state, we're hoping that we can get that to kind of offset some more cost. Even though we are hoping still to get that 46 million and then continue to build our reserve. So that's the goal. The goal is to use all the CARES first, build up the reserves of Central Falls so that we can do some expansion, whether or not it's educationally, in terms of books, reconfigurations of rooms, technology, so forth and so on. And I'll always say our long-term aspiration is to make sure, as Andrew asks all the time, how's our cash flow doing? My goal in the role that I am in is I would like us to have a reserve of 1 month's payroll. So should we ever get in a bind, we always have a month to negotiate what we need with RIDE or the city, as the city comes afloat and is able to do more. That we're always able to move along and people don't have to worry about their livelihood. So that is my presentation for this month. Oh, lastly, I do want to thank Glenda Lee's Cologne for, I went to go get my COVID shot, and I thank you, Dr. Toledo and the mayor and everyone else. But it reminded me as I walked in and I seen her of all the people who work with the Central Falls schools, and out in the private world, it's called in-kind investments. People who donate and people who give their time and their efforts, but you can't necessarily count it on the books. But it does have value. So what people typically do is they plus it on the revenue side or the income side, and they subtract it out on the expense side, just so that as a person would project out, you're able to recognize the value and the incentive and what you would pay for if people did not give. So I did want to thank her and recognize her for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you so much.
Any questions for Carrie? I can't see everyone on the screen, so if you want to unmute, Andrew, yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Director Simmons, for a thorough report as always. I just wanted to follow up with you on the conversation that you referenced with RIDE regarding enrollment. And I don't want to mischaracterize what you said, but it's interesting in that when we had enrollment issues last year where we had more students than our budget or than our state appropriation, that I sort of felt like they turned a deaf ear to those pleas. But now that the tables have turned and we're under enrolled, it all of a sudden seems like they're very interested in talking to us. Can you speak to that, please?
What I'll say is we have a chance to build our budget off of active enrollment, seeing that their eyes are so present.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask Chris a
Yeah,
quick question?
Yeah, please.
Oh, go ahead. If you're going to follow up to that, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna, that was my question. Historically, enrollment our budget has been based on March enrollment. And I'm concerned if we're being pushed to build a budget or negotiate a budget that is based on lower enrollment, that I think doesn't necessarily reflect normal times, but in fact reflects the fact that we're in, our middle and high school has been distance learning for a long time, and that daily attendance has been, I just feel like our enrollment numbers are not a reflection of like who's enrolled in our district, because I imagine that kids aren't signing parents aren't signing their kids out at an exponential rate. And so, you know, I'd love to be kept abreast of how those discussions go, and to the extent that there's pushback, I think we should. And also wondering how these conversations are also happening with other districts. I imagine that more affluent districts aren't having similar dips in enrollment, and I think there's just that all seems extremely inequitable. That conversation just seems extremely inequitable, you know, as we think about funding the district based on this wild time we're living in. So it's really a comment, not a question. Well, thank you for bringing it up, Andrew. Sonia, I will pass it on to you.
Dr. Simmons, the last bullet about your long-term plans.
Yes,
How
ma'am.
do you envision getting there? What is your timeline? What are the things that you're doing or you plan to do in the next however many fiscal years you think you'll get to get there? Given that we're constantly so on the line and strapped for using every single dollar we have.
Now I might have the Frank Sinatra that I bite off more than I can chew, but I do it my way. I would like to say we can make a dent and have get back to a respectable reserve over the next 2 to 3 years. So this is year 1. I'm kind of looking at this year, and I keep my fingers crossed if we can really cut down our discretionary spending. It will really be helpful this year and be valuable to us for next year to to have strides to start talking about even talking about how do we hold on to a reserve. Right now, or as of last year leading to this year, it's about the reserve help keep us stable versus how do we hold on to the reserve and build on that. So I'm hoping over the next 3 years we'll be able to do that. Again, while not ideal, just circling back to building the reserve and the comment about enrollment, the one thing that I was grateful about was the fact that, and I was on the email, Rod was talking with the state about our funding, and they asked me the question, can you make up this difference for this 1.5 million? So I was grateful for the fact that they would even stop and come to the district and say, basically, help us make a case. That's how I kind of interpreted it. And that's just me, maybe, and I'm really not an optimist, but help us make a case for it. And so I appreciate that versus saying they don't need it or attempting to make a case for us that wasn't something that we could necessarily speak to. So 2 to 3 years, I would like to get to that place.
When was the last time we had any sort of reserve?
I had a reserve for the last few years. It's just been going down. I want to say when I got in the district, I don't even want to say it because and mischaracterize it, but I do have those figures. Okay. Coming into this year, I want to say it could have been about 600,000, 300,000, something like that. But I would like to get back to the place where we're going up. And it's really used for strategic purposes when we do go into it versus it just going down and, can it help stop a deficit?
It just brings up to me sort of the power we have or don't have over our budget, that we did have a reserve and it's been sort of used for things that, like you said, may not have been our intended purpose. So if we are going down this exercise of building that up again and thinking that through, what can we do to protect it? Is it, does this board have any authority to decide how those funds are used and kept and not touched for reasons other than whatever we prescribe, or is it just on the right side? Just think that it's an important thing to have and to do. But as we've seen over the few years, as it gets taken and it gets, we wanted it to be, what can we do moving forward so that it's a little bit more protected and safe? So I don't know what your thoughts are. We could have that conversation.
I'll do
It's
some,
on the right level that we pursue that conversation as well.
yeah, I definitely will, I'll shop around to some other business managers who I know, as well as I'll reread Article 16, which talks about a title funding. I know for some funding you can earmark. I just don't know the hierarchy of when and where it stops around operations, depending on how it actually gets funded. That's where it gets tricky.
Anyone else have questions or comments?
If I could
All
just,
right.
Madam
Oh,
Chair,
yes, go
quickly.
ahead.
Sorry,
Yes,
if I
of
could just
course.
respond to what Vice Chair Gray said. I think my understanding is that when we've had a reserve, that when the new fiscal year has kicked in, that whatever the reserve or carry forward balance, whatever that number is, it ends up becoming part of the operating budget for the next year. And so then it all either gets spent or it doesn't. And that's sort of the challenge here. Whereas if we were able to establish a reserve, not call it a rainy day fund, but just call it a reserve, and that at the end of each year, sweep it away and earmark it as such, then we wouldn't fall potential victim to some of these games that are being played where, last year's, surplus becomes this year's first dollars to be spent coming out of the gate. And so I think that's the strategy that we have to sort of think about employing. I don't know if Director Simmons, if you had any thoughts on that.
No, it sounds like a good plan.
All right. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much as always, Carrie. I think I heard you say that you're not an optimist, but I would beg to differ. I'm pretty sure that every time you give your updates, it's like outlook, good outlook, positive outlook. It tends to ground me anyway. Sometimes like, okay, it's not all bad, but
Thank you.
so thank. So the next item is school building committee updates, item 7.
And
Dr. Toledo, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure, the committee has not met since in the last month, so there's actually no updates here, but we kept it as a standing item per board's request.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, even if that's the update. Thank you. Next item is old business, item 8A, Central Falls School District Administrator Compensation Policy, and item 8B, Central Falls School District Professional Support Staff Hiring Policy. This is the second reading of both policies. I know that Sonia, I think you sent some comments to the superintendent. Why don't we take it one at a time? So we'll take the Central Falls School District Administrator's Compensation Policy first. So I'll entertain a motion to approve item 8A.
So
moved. Second.
Moved by Glenda Liz Colon and seconded by Andrew Branson. Now we can have a discussion and ask questions if we have them. Dr. Toledo, would it be helpful for you to walk us through any substantive changes that you made to the document
Sure, and I do want to start by saying a huge thank you to Vice Chair Grace, who gave really helpful feedback. And in the versions that you have in your packet, we purposefully left all those track changes so that you could see the feedback and the input. I think the biggest thing in these policies, just as you know, we're working with a new attorney who has helped with some of these policies. And so I think there was healthy feedback on even just some what makes sense for this board and different styles. So one of the things that Vice Chair Grace recommended is pulling those processes and internal sort of protocols for how something will be implemented out of the policies and keeping what goes in front of you, the board, strictly policy, while of course, you know, if you'd like to vet those internal processes, we can do that. But I think that'll be one of the big shifts that you see. Will be pulling out those internal processes from the actual policy document, even though they were in there for the first read. And then in terms of other feedback on this one, I would say there are actually fewer changes to the compensation policy. But I'll also invite Vice Chair Grace, who spent the most time with the documents, if you have anything specific you wanted to share.
I'll mute myself, sorry. Trying to pull it and my internet is being really difficult, so I'm trying to pull the document. So a lot of the changes that I propose were just moving sentences around just for clarity, and putting like the objective in one place or where it wasn't before. I'm trying to, oh, why is it being so difficult? I did have some questions and I don't know how the board wants to deal with it. But on the criteria, for example, there are a list of criteria that would determine whether someone would get a salary increase. And sort of my first reading was that felt a little strange that some of them were sort of objective, like the cost of living increases, and then others like specific needs of the district. So I wasn't sure, and this is sort of a conversation with the superintendent as well, as to how this would come together and what it would look like. It could be that this is resolved when the actual process and actual way of doing it gets resolved, but for me, it felt a little difficult to have it in this policy, the way listed, the way it is. For example, like specific needs of the district, if this is an employee, then they are meeting a need of the district. So whether that person deserves a raise, that number C feels strange to me as to be one of the criteria for a salary increase. So those are some points for discussion that I think we should discuss, unless everybody's okay with it the way it is, and we can leave it the way it is.
I think, I mean, Dr. Toledo, I don't know if you have an example, but when I look at that, I think that's a good point, Sonia. When I look at that that criteria, I think of the limited number of bilingual staff that we have, right? And how being bilingual or multilingual isn't necessarily honored the way degrees are honored, the way other things are honored, but certainly add value to that role, and how this could be a way to sort of honor that. And that may be the wrong example, but that's how I sort of read that that criteria C. Dr. Toledo, I don't know if you wanted to add.
That's actually the exact example that we had in mind when we put it there. If you want us to specify so that it isn't just needs of the district, but multilingualism or we could do that. We tried to keep it a little more open, not knowing what the future needs might be.
I hadn't seen it that way, so that's a great example. That's an explanation that I needed. It didn't come up to me that way, and especially because that sentence had come up in the other policy of the hiring specific needs of the district. And we had spoken, and it will come, I guess, when we speak the next one, about giving that sort of preference or added weight to language and residency. So if the person is in the district and is our employee, then I hadn't seen it. All right, now it makes a little bit more sense. But maybe they're writing it differently or just leaving it that way, if we all understand what it means.
Does anyone else have thoughts on that? Would love to hear from others. Would it be helpful, Sonia, and maybe this makes the document a little, I don't know, if there's an IE after specific needs of the district, to give an example, or do you feel like that's good enough sort of not clarity, but if that example helps you sort of think about what that might look like?
I mean, it's just that we have, for example, so E speaks to educational degrees, right? In that are advantageous to the needs of the district. So we have other ways of describing that. It just to me that it felt like it wasn't clear to me. It could be multilingual, you can leave it. If everyone is okay with the way the language is there and no one had seen a problem, it's just a personal misunderstanding that's been clarified, it's okay. I think that the strength of this comes in the way it's implemented. And I like when policies are broad enough to allow for flexibility. So I don't want to be too rigid and putting too many details, because I actually took things off that I thought did that. So if specific needs of the district encompasses what the superintendent wants and future staff and board members can understand what it means, then that's sufficient for me.
Okay.
Question. Just I guess adding on to what Sonia said, and also I know you added a word talking about adding multilingual. How is that related to pay increases though? So I understand like bringing people in, but like from one year to the next, the city of Central Falls, like, you know, it's like I'm thinking like in regards to like, am I gonna go from this proficiency in Portuguese, which is nothing right now, to next? Like I'm just trying to see like what that means. For example, like when you speak about multilingual, how does that affect increases? If anything, I feel like that it affects recruitment, or like, but not so much how much a person is paid increased, right? So I don't know if what I'm asking makes sense.
It does, that it would be more upon the point of hiring, and that someone, I mean, in theory, someone could go, I think, and study and become multilingual, but it's more rare, certainly. The way that I read it, but we should maybe tweak slightly, is like number 2 is talking about, yeah, maybe we want to have it somewhere like note that it would be in sort of the initial salary discussion. I hear your point, that it would be less about an ongoing increase because you continue to be multilingual.
There you go. Cool. Thanks. I do have another question on the other document, unless people still want to add on to this one.
No, so we're going to take it one at a time. We still have to vote on this one. So then we'll move on to the next one. Yeah. Any other?
So just final, I took out on the second last page, J, because it was listed as, it just described the federal law. So if it either, I don't know what our legal counsel believes, whether it needs to be in this policy. I struck it out, but if it needs to be here, it needs to be moved to it as an asterisk at the bottom, as a footnote, but it really isn't a benefit that we offer, it is a requirement by law. So I don't know, Dr. Toledo, how you're going to finish this up, if this is something that we're going to approve with the assumption that it stays because legal counsel tells us to.
did bring the revised version to our attorney just to make sure that with the changes that it's still in his mind met the intent, even if we were shaping it to our context, and he felt that all those changes were totally appropriate if they made more sense to us.
So do we keep it or we strike it out completely?
He was fine with the strike that you recommended.
Okay.
Obviously, because the federal law is still in place, it's not that that protection won't be there. It just doesn't, to your point, need to be listed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Under
Okay,
benefits- Oh.
no, go ahead.
Under benefits, I was looking at, I saw that you said holidays. Is that religious holidays including various religions, or is that like the ones that are decided by the, I guess the calendar that the United States wants to go by?
The intent would be to be inclusive of any holiday for a particular staff member, but we could clarify.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Anything else on the administrator's compensation policy? All right, so Sonia, thank you so much for dissecting this policy and providing the feedback. Even just, it even looks cleaner. So I appreciate the time that you've put forth to making this better and more clear. So there was a motion made by Glenda Lees, I believe, and a second made by Andrew. We had a discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. We have just approved the Central Falls School District Administrator's Compensation Policy. So moving on to the next item, it is the Central Falls School District Professional Support Staff Hiring Policy. So I imagine we'll have similar comments on this one. I'm just going to pull it up again.
We're the same.
Okay, so why don't I entertain a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Glenda Liz Colon, second by Sonia Grace. Now we are in discussion.
So I could almost say the same comment. So first I want to thank Vice Chair Grace. She did a beautiful job, I think, of reorganizing some of the language. I think it reads a lot more clearly now. And then the addition of a language and residency preference, which certainly aligns to the conversation at our January meeting. So it was great to see that be brought into the policy so clearly, which is F on in the policy. And then the other shifts are more, I would say, yeah. And then she asked some questions within, and I replied so that everyone could see those responses for different specific questions. Any questions on this policy?
I think we need to discuss the
I just
language.
see, sorry, go ahead, Sonia.
F. So I very blatantly, I'll admit that I copied it from the city's ordinance that passed in this past December, that spoke to hiring and preference given to residents and people with who are bilingual. I did not add a percentage, and I left, so just a couple of sentences, again, leaving it for us to discuss as to whether we want, what that percentage should be, how we would describe it and whether we wanted to add anything else to it. So that is a big discussion point that I just put something there for us to think through together.
Andrew?
Thank you. So I also just had a question and a clarification on section F, and that is, has there been any discussion about how employees, candidates would demonstrate second bilingual or language proficiency, whether it's through an assessment or something? This is something that we're, we, in my own organization, we provide, compensation for bilingual, but we've gone through a process of, making sure, that there's an assessment, so we can just be, there's a parity in determining how that is determined. So just a question about how that would be determined, so that it doesn't be, it sort of becomes less subjective about whether somebody has that required level of fluency that you're looking for.
I appreciate you raising that point. We had not discussed, but I do think that's important.
Am I good?
Oh, sorry, Brian. I'm sorry. I didn't even notice that you wanted to speak. Of course, go ahead.
It's okay. It's okay. So this is something I brought up last time, but I didn't see any changes that reflected it. It was in regards to the screening committee for the appointments of school principals. Something that I feel like very strongly about is the importance of including students at the table when it comes to those things, right? So like I see that we included parents through like the PTO or parent volunteers, but when we think about the ones who are going to be interacting with those people on a day-to-day basis, I think it's important for them to be there as well, making that decision and doing those evaluations. I don't know how deciding which students or what, but I do think like keeping it open to all students having the opportunity, no matter what their I don't know how involved they are in school, their GPA, anything along those lines. I think it's important to definitely leave the door open to students of all various levels, academically, behaviorally, and yeah, I think to definitely be sure that we're not letting, yeah, I think I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful, and I apologize that it didn't get integrated this time. It will absolutely be in there. And I'm thinking back to when we hired Assistant Principal Hill, and she went through a student portion of the interview, and how rich that was to see her engaging with students before the decision was made.
And I can speak to that as well. I stopped reviewing Bryant when it said protocol, as the superintendent had spoken about separating the protocol from the policy. So as we could guide some of and say there are some things that need to be included, the who sits and sort of the details, like a really, really detailed, and I had originally made comments about the application where there's a portion that says an application will only be considered complete when these 10 things are done. But then later on, one of those things shows up as a requirement for hiring. So there are some things that I didn't even go into with the superintendent, because we said this is sort of the process protocols that are not part of this policy. We could add something that sort of binds the school district by matter of policy to ensure that student voice is included at any committee that is created, but not necessarily. That's why I didn't show up, because I ended up not getting to that section of commenting on who is sitting on these committees. But I think that that's a good point, and we could introduce it as an amendment to the policy by saying that every committee shall include parents and students, and then that sort of provides us that coverage forever and ever until somebody changes the policy again.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I was going to say if we can't do much about, because it is a protocol, is there a way to revisit the protocol? It's like,
yeah,
and go from there, and then that way it's like it's a bigger thing, right? Because it'll affect multiple different policies. or no? I'm not sure.
I would say we could, I think that the best way would be, it was 15, to include something in the policy to that effect.
In this policy, you're saying, Sonia, right? To
Mhm.
introduce- All right, so we do have a motion on, well,
We need to
let's
finish residency.
let's finish, yep, we'll finish discussing and then we'll go back to that amendment idea, Brian, okay? Is that okay? All right, any other, I have a quick thought, but wanted to just make sure that other board members had a chance to ask other questions or comments. I'm not seeing anything. So my, under item F as well, I lost it. Where is it? Just wondering about the language that says legal and actual residents of the city. I feel like isn't it implied that like you have, I don't know, you have to be a legal resident to work. And so I'm wondering if we can rephrase that to read preference shall, similar to the one above, preference shall be given to candidates who are residents of the city. I guess I'm wondering about the legal and actual part of it. Like, I don't know.
So that was again, that was copied from the ordinance.
From the,
I went back and forth about whether I wanted to keep that because I thought the same thing. I think I don't know the difference, to be honest, and how we would look at it. But I said, but some attorney put it on there. And maybe there's something more to that language that I understand. So I literally copied, there was more to that paragraph, like there was things between us. I just put the two sentences there. Again, this is maybe something that our legal counsel can say whether those words need to stay or we can revise them. But that was what was copied from the ordinance that the city passed in December.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems like those words should be part of the, right? They're sort of implied with any hiring policy, it seems to me. But again, you're right. Like I might be missing something. Could we approve it if y'all are comfortable approving it pending pending legal eyes on that wording? And if legal says it's best to have it, then we can just add it back in. Does that make sense, Dr. Toledo, for that portion?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments on the policy before we circle back to the amendment?
Are we adding a percentage?
Oh yeah, that's right. That's the other part that we had to talk. Didn't the ordinance in the city say 10%?
It does.
I think that's appropriate. Dr. Toledo, do you have thoughts on percentage?
I'm comfortable with your recommendation of 10%.
Any other thoughts from others? Okay.
Nope.
Sonia, does 10% sound good?
Yeah, sounds fine to me.
All right. Anything else? All right, so we do have a motion on the table made by Glenda Lees and seconded by Sonia. Sonia, you are better at the procedural stuff than I am. Do you take back your second and Glenda Lees?
We can, if Brian wants to make a motion to amend, then that sort of supersedes.
Okay, so we don't have to sort of take away the second and the, okay. So Brian, why don't you introduce the amendment that you were discussing, that Sonia suggested. So
he should do all three at once because we're adding things to the ordinance, and then it will all be one motion to amend, and then we'll approve as amended.
What, all
That makes
three?
sense.
Oh, all three of the things. So, okay.
All the three it's changes.
Yep. Yep. So Sonia, do you want to do the
Sure,
motion?
I'll
Or
do
it's
it.
easier if you do
So
it.
I move that to amend
make the
the
motion.
ordinance by adding on section F, at least the percentage of 10% for language. And then changing the second sentence in the same paragraph to read, preference shall be given to residents of the city when they are equally qualified unless otherwise prohibited by law. And then adding section, right, G, because that's where it would end, that it's a sentence to be written to require that any hiring committees include parents and students of the Central Falls School District.
Dr. Toledo, does that all, did you get all of that?
Fine, I'll probably watch the recording, but yes.
I'm
All right,
adding
thanks.
it. I'm adding it to the document too, Dr. Toledo,
Thanks.
as we speak.
All right. Thank you, Sonia. Brian, does that satisfy the language piece? The inclusion of student voice in the hiring?
Yeah.
Okay,
Just
great.
want to make sure they're there.
Okay, great. All right, so now that the motion to amend has been made by Sonia, do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Glenda Liz Colon. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. So the policy has been approved with the motions, or have we just voted on the motion to amend?
We amended. Now we need the motion to
Got it.
approve as amended.
So the amendments have been approved, and now we'll go back to the original motion, which was made by Glenda Liz.
Well, no, so now I make a motion to approve the policy as amended.
Got it. So Sonia made a motion to approve the policy as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Brian Estrada. Now all those in favor, please say aye.
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 I'm also an aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The professional and support staff hiring policy has been passed. It's been approved. Whew. All right. Thank you everyone for that. I know it's a little tedious and it's hard when we're sort of we're looking at separate documents and trying to make it work, but thank you. All right, our next item is, it's actually public comment. So if you are present in the meeting and want to provide public comment, please add your name to the chat. Gonna give it a few more.
Is the chat open for everyone?
I think so, but if someone wants to double check.
I do see one raised hand. Cheryl Thurber is raising her hand, so perhaps she's gonna.
Sorry,
Jamie.
just give me a minute over here.
Okay, thanks. And big thanks to Assistant Principal Hill, who's standing in as our tech director, is not available tonight. So thanks to Jamie.
People are saying that the chat is disabled. Can you check on that?
Yeah, that's what they're doing right now.
Thank you so much.
If someone could just give the chat a try, put your name in there if you're up for public comment. I think maybe I've gotten it. Yes, it looks like it is working now.
I'm seeing people, I'm seeing people add their name. So if everyone would just give me a moment, I'm just writing everyone's name down. It'll just take me a second, okay? Okay, so the first person is Michelle Pearson.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so hello everyone. I teach kindergarten at Veteran School, and I just wanted to express my concern based on a faculty meeting that I attended on Tuesday. It sounds as if the principal would like to move forward with getting more students back into the building, and I definitely would advocate for that. I just feel like we need to wait until people have had a chance to get the second dose of the vaccine to really be protected before tripling the number of people in the building. I feel like there are many people, I've been working from home due to family circumstances and will be out due to medical needs, but I feel like it's a big risk and that there needs to be a lot of planning to go into place, which had happened over the summer. Miss Lynch was standing in as principal at the time, and there were lots and lots of discussions and meetings around reopening the buildings at the beginning of the year. And that was a very time-consuming process that also needed to be vetted, and we had to actually live through those experiences to make decisions on what needed to be changed and tweaked to make it successful. And I feel as though the current idea of bringing these kids back on the Monday after February break is just too soon. I don't think that there's enough time to have the building and the staff and the children be ready to go back that quickly. I just wanted to express my concern about that.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we have Cheryl Thurber.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I just wanted to express some concerns I had about the Rhode Island Senate hearing that was held last Wednesday night for Senate Bill 13 for the charter school moratorium. We in Central Falls know firsthand the devastating financial impacts that charter schools have had on our small district. I listened to my union president testify and list all the programs and services for students that have been and services that have been cut for our students over the years. Our students are the ones that lose out through the charter expansions. We have teachers have rallied at the State House and begged for funding over the years. The teachers in Central Falls would give anything for their students. So as I listened to the many statements during the 4-hour testimony, you can imagine my surprise and disbelief when Central Falls Board of Trustees member Cologne gave her public comment and asked that the moratorium on charter schools not go through because her daughter wants to attend Segway. How can a member of this board that is representing the students and families of the Central Falls Public School District advocate for expanding charter schools in Central Falls? We have all seen the devastating consequences when 33% of our children attend charter schools. If you do not advocate and believe in the Central Falls Public School District, you should not be serving on a board designed to serve the students and families in the public school that need your support. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Next, Jessica Parkhurst.
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Parkhurst. I'm a teacher at Veterans Elementary, and at this time, my class is fully distanced. Month after month, my colleagues have attended these meetings, and month after month, we have spoken from the heart to this board about all manner of things: firing teachers, charter expansion, distance learning, and now treatment centers at Calcutt Middle School. Month after month, this board thanks us for the work we're doing and assures us that you're thankful for our hard work and that you all want to support the work we're doing. I have to be honest. My colleagues and I don't believe this to be true. In the spring, instead of standing with us and demanding the state keep their promise to fully fund Central Falls public schools, you voted to fire 46 teachers and then asked us to rally in a pandemic at the State House. We did to save our own jobs. You did not help us get the funding we needed to ensure our public schools would be fully staffed and fully funded. We did that. Still, we kept coming to these meetings asking for your help. We asked to support us as we went back to our buildings to begin a school year unlike any other we have ever experienced, and I truly hope we never have to again. We wanted to know our buildings were safe, not just for us, but for our students. We asked for air quality reports, we asked for PPE, we asked for clear, concise, specific guidelines and protocols. To this day, not one single building is doing the same thing as far as protocols or keeping the staff updated, nor have our expertise been tapped to support the plans for reopening or adding additional students. The promise of transparency has been broken at every turn. None could be more glaring than last week when our Calcutt teachers returned to their building to get their rooms ready to administer access testing. Our teachers, the very ones that this board says they care about and respect, walked into a building that was not ready to welcome students, despite the district having all fall to ready the building. Heating units still dismantled and heat not working on some of the coldest days of the year. Despicable. Add to that our teachers found their classrooms being used as break rooms for the National Guard and all of their personal items moved around. Maybe you don't understand what a teacher's classroom becomes to them. Let me tell you, it becomes our second home. We spend thousands of our own dollars to make them welcoming, warm places that our students want to come to every day. Think of how you would feel if you came home to your home ransacked. Would it be okay with you? If the answer is no, then you might have an inkling of how our teachers felt last week. For most of the week, these teachers were also walking past the hazardous waste boxes you heard Councilwoman Colon refer to earlier. It amazed me that after hearing the response, no one had any questions about why it was still in the hallway when teachers and students were in the building and why it would be hanging around at all. I'm shocked that all of you accepted the answer and did not have higher expectations of someone using space in our building. A middle school is not a hospital, and while this drive-through service is absolutely necessary for our community, opening the building to students and staff is not acceptable if this continues to function as a field hospital. The captain spoke to what kids would see coming to school. It is clear she does not know the whole school design. On the second floor, there are floor-to-ceiling glass windows that look into the gym. Students traveling to classes are always drawn to those windows to look in. Imagine looking into the gym, which is the space in the school that so many want to go to every period if possible, and seeing uniformed soldiers after walking into the building that teachers were told on Friday would be patrolled by the CFPD. Our community is already an overly policed community. Now they will come to a school that is patrolled and soldiers are taking over their gym. This is adding unneeded and unwanted trauma. I read on the Safe Return to Schools website in the comment section of a post about the field hospital that Meg O'Leary at TLC had considered allowing the site at their school, but quote, sadly, we needed the space. I ask you, do our public school children not need their gym when they return to school? I also ask, would you accept that for your own children? I know Councilwoman Colon is anxious to get her own children back to school, and I absolutely want her children to return to school. They are bright, thoughtful, and caring young people, but I want them to come back to a school that is ready to welcome them in a warm and healthy environment. If the building is opening for children, the Fields Hospital should be moved. The last thing I need to say tonight is this. I am absolutely exhausted and tired of begging this board for the help and respect that every single one of my colleagues deserves. I am tired of telling you that our public schools deserve the very best resources and supports. And I am tired of members of this board smiling and nodding while showing up to meetings to advocate for new charters and expansions of existing charters. You sit on this board because in 1991, the state took over the funding of the public schools. You all should be fighting for our schools. And quite honestly, anyone who feels that our funds should continue to be funneled out of our classrooms and into new or expanded charters should resign. We need your voice and we need you to be standing with us. But sadly, it is clear you do not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica. Next we have Sarah Raynon.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me this time to speak. I was debating on whether or not I actually wanted to speak tonight because I feel like every time teachers speak, it often falls on deaf ears, but I'm going to give it one more chance because I'm a warrior. I want to echo what my colleague just said with the word transparency. We've heard it so much, but please explain to me how in 1 square mile, every school has separate protocols for COVID-related policies, such as attestation forms, reporting of positive cases, and quarantining of classrooms. How is this fair for our families that have students in multiple schools? How is this transparent? While we're talking transparency, let's discuss the treatment center that started on January 25th. That was never discussed or mentioned to staff until after the news story broke on Channel 10, Friday, the 28th. Why were my students' parents not notified until this about last night after they had already been in the building for a week to test? How can that be transparent? Shouldn't those parents have been able to have that choice whether or not they felt comfortable sending their child? I know we've heard this ventilation systems are separate and they've passed inspection, but where is the proof? We have yet to see actual reports proving this, even after teachers requested it. The only reports on our websites are fire inspection, building occupancy, and the COVID checklist that proves our system failed. It's really important that you know that since September, Calcut has had a heating company working on their heating system, and they're still there working in the schools. But we're just to trust that this treatment center directly underneath the classroom is on a separate HVAC system without seeing proof. You've heard the National Guard talk about these barriers they put in place. The plastic sheet that didn't exist until Friday after numerous staff and even students walked by this treatment area, and the 15 boxes labeled biohazardous infectious medical waste. I'll repeat that one more time. 15 boxes of biohazardous infectious waste. So I'll ask again, where's the transparency? Is it when the district doesn't notify other schools that they're quarantining and positive cases, knowing our families have kids in multiple schools? Is it when the district forgot to tell us that there were positive patients receiving treatment in a building for 2 hours? Is it when the district forgot to tell us that our school would be converted into a field hospital? Because what else would you call a place that is serving people of the community with IVs and being the only school in the state that has a treatment like this, as the doctor mentioned, all hospitals? Is the transparency found when I was directed to assure my parents that their children would be safe, but then expose their children to infectious medical waste in unsealed hallways for 2 days? I'm just confused where this transparency is. Let's debunk a few misconceptions for the people, and let me echo my colleague. Middle schools are not hospitals, not where we should be saving lives. We should be changing lives in middle schools. We should be helping our students cope with the trauma they've experienced this year, not letting them enter a building with sick, infected people, soldiers, blocked off hallways, because that's traumatizing. As a grown adult, I didn't feel safe seeing this. Our school can see into the floor downstairs in the gym where you can see the Army soldiers and their fatigue. How could we possibly expect our students to feel safe when they return to school with caution tape blocking areas, an ambulance parked outside, their hallways lined in plastic, and soldiers in their gym, the place they love? Just last month, we sat in a board meeting where former police chief had to explain the purpose of the SRO program and how these police officers were portrayed in schools. And now you have soldiers in our building walking in full Army fatigue. This is absurd to me that we're allowing this to happen. I want to be very clear. I know we need this type of facility, and I know it will and has saved lives. But seriously, does this need to exist in a middle school with students and staff in attendance during school hours? Why can't it be open after school hours? If this is truly safe and it needs to exist during school hours, then every school in Central Falls should have one, charters included. If it's going to save lives, then let's save them everywhere. Where is the equity in just our students seeing their schools like this? Sadly, we all know the real reason why they aren't in charters, probably because the parents wouldn't allow that, right? That type of environment is not worthy for their scholars. As a staff who has worked here for 8 years, CF has become my home. The students, their family, this culture, it has become who I am as a person. COVID has taught me that now is the time we have to start having people in positions of power that are going to fight for our children, to have an equitable education. We need to fight more than ever to make sure that they enter these schools and they feel safe like other kids throughout the city, state, and the country. Other schools don't look like this, so theirs shouldn't. But how do we stand a chance when some of our very own board members have made public efforts to further hinder this progress of equity by openly supporting charter schools and speaking out tonight as if these issues aren't a big deal? These actions do the opposite of fighting for equity. So I have to ask you, at what point are you guys going to fight for our students? I will end this very long-winded statement, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak, by saying I love this city. So please understand that I'm being the voice for students and their families because they're afraid to speak. I will always fight for them. I will always advocate for them. I will always protect them and speak when something is wrong. This situation is wrong. It's not appropriate for school settings. If the city wants this, then it should be somewhere else in the city, not with children. No other children in the state have to see their schools like this. So why should ours? Our students deserve better. Please, as a board, advocate for what our students deserve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we have Jordana Ruggieri.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I didn't hear my name being called. Thank you again for allowing me to speak tonight. What I want to speak about is not so much the safety and the PPP. I really want to speak about the teaching and learning. Throughout this, COVID, and even prior to COVID, everything's been about operating budgets and, maintaining, are we going to get to zero? Are we going to have a deficit? Nothing ever is about teaching and learning. And especially since the beginning of this pandemic, we have looked at, failure rates for distance learning, why distance learning isn't working, but nowhere has anyone put in the resources. And I know this goes beyond the school district, and I know this goes beyond, what you can do, but that is where the problem is. Distance learning may not have been successful because there's no resources being put in it, not from the state, not from the government. My students did an amazing job tonight. I went out and I found that book. I purchased the audio book. I purchased the book and downloaded a program and purchased a program to download it into a PDF because we don't have those resources. And, when we talk about getting the kids back in school, we need the resources there to support them. Teaching and learning needs to, again, be the priority. PPP cannot only be the priority. Antibacterial wipes and cleaning, that just is the only thing that we talk about at BOT, at staff meetings, at PLT, policies, procedures. It's not about our real job anymore. And I don't know how we get back to that. And my ask to the board is somehow we get back to that and we fight for that, because that's what our students need. You saw the incredible brilliance that they are, and they deserve for us to fight to get it back about the teaching and learning. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordana. Next, we have principal comment.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me time to speak. I'm actually I have many topics I would like to speak about tonight, but I'm gonna narrow it down to just a couple. First, thank you, Jordana Ruggieri, for bringing that up. I couldn't agree more in terms of the focus and how these times have created really a necessity for us to focus on some other things, but also a reminder that it's not the pandemic isn't the only thing going on right now, that education is our focus and it's what we're here for. So I do appreciate that there are other people thinking about that as well. And to that point, I did want to go back to the budget conversation, because I'm really, really concerned about continuing to, hear about this 46 or 44 million or whatever it is, when I know our staff at our school, part of the staff that I need just to provide the basics are being funded by Title I funds, and those are supposed to be supplemental. And Stephanie Gonzalez brought that up a couple of meetings ago. And I just want to reiterate that that I just want us to keep looking at it and keep looking at it and make sure that what's identified in general funds covers every possible thing that we really need that's not supplemental. It's so, so important. So if we could just do that with that piece, I would really appreciate it. And then the ESSER funds and the all of these additional funds through CARES and all of this, I'm just, you know, what Jordana just talked about, like the impact of pandemic on the education of our students. We need extra money to address what has happened. And so we've started talking as a school about, you know, what are we going to put in place, not just today, not just for the rest of this year, but probably for the next 2 to 5 years, to ensure that we're taking care of our kids' social and emotional well-being minimally as it was pre-pandemic, but now especially. Like, there's no possible way we don't need additional funding to help our students cope with the trauma that has occurred just in the last year, let alone on top of the original traumas that already existed. The second thing that I wanted to note about that is that using all of those additional emergency funds for tech and HVAC and all of those things that are basics, the foundational, like minimal things that we should have already, doesn't leave any of that money available to actually deal with the emergency. And so I am very concerned about the fact that all of those funds are gone, and they had to be. I get it. It was out of necessity. We had to use them for that. But now we don't have them available for the education of our children. And so that deeply concerns me. And then I did just want to say that the greatest argument that I can think of to RIDE or to the state or to anybody who's listening right now, that we need additional funds and that we shouldn't use this year's enrollment to predict anything. Ex-President Trump closed the borders a while ago. There have been literally very few new arrivals from our most frequently sending countries. And so we are, as President Biden and Kamala Harris begin to open up the borders more, and the Congress passes new laws and new legislation that allows that flow to pick up again, our enrollment is not going to continue going down. It will go up. I cannot imagine a world where that is not true. And we need to be prepared for it, and we need to have resources, because not only are we going to have increasing enrollment, the level of trauma, once again, all of the people that have been waiting in different countries to come into the country have been subjected to horrible conditions, some for up to a year and a half, 2 years, just waiting in a country that wasn't even their original country, in very bad conditions. And so I can't stress enough how like the expansion of resources we're going to need over the next 2 to 5 years to address just the emergencies, not the stuff that wasn't being paid for to begin with, just the emergencies out of policies and pandemic over the last few years. I really hope that people are taking that into consideration, that are thinking about what kind of funding we might need in the next few years. I'll keep it at that. I thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Principal Comment. The next person we have is Kara Iafredi.
Hello, hold on one second. Let me get somewhere where there's light. Sorry. Hi, so I'm a teacher at Calcutt Middle School, and I just wanted to mirror some of my colleagues' concerns about the treatment center that is stationed at Calcutt Middle School. I think that we have an opportunity with the month ahead to make some changes before our students are back in the building full time at whatever capacity they will be after February break. I don't think it's right that we should have COVID positive patients in the same facility as students who are entering in and out. I think that we're a school and not a hospital, and therefore we shouldn't have to expose students to that. I also want to reiterate the idea that it is very unusual to see soldiers and plastic barriers and hazardous waste materials in a school building. It was jarring for us as staff members to see that. I can only imagine the shock and the responses that will come from students who are seeing this, especially those who have had traumatic experiences with COVID already. So many of our families have been affected. So I do see the need for something like this to exist in the community, but it does not need to be at the middle school. And I think that in the next couple of weeks, as we prepare for reopening, that we really need to consider relocating that site in order to make sure that our students have a successful year. I also think that it's important that our students have access to gym. And it's not fair if they're one of the only schools in the state that do not. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Kara. Okay, so that brings us to the end of public comment. The next item is superintendent comment.
Okay, I'll try to keep this very brief. I made fewer slides than usual since we had 2 presentations, and I know everyone's probably exhausted, but did just want to share some of the standard updates. One being enrollment and absenteeism, so that you can see almost a trend of the pandemic. So unfortunately, attendance continues to chronic absenteeism, continues to grow and is a real problem, which is one of the reasons when we hear feedback from students and families that we really do feel so committed to increasing in-person learning, and are doing that quite intentionally when most people will have had the second vaccine. We're so very grateful, and I'll share more about that later, but the phase-in plans that will begin after February break will lead to a vast majority of staff already having had both vaccines as we increase the number of students in person and hopefully therefore reduce some of our absenteeism issues. In terms of student learning, I am just sharing a literacy update because, again, I think this makes another really important case for getting kids back in person. It's been really challenging. Teachers are doing a Herculean effort, but having less time with kids and then the hurdles of distance learning, while some teachers have been able to find that same growth, we do see that there is far more growth happening for students who are in person when we do cuts of the data. And you can see that unfortunately, on average, while we have now tomorrow starts second semester, so we are at the halfway point of the school year, we're still seeing average growth of the 1 month, 3 month, 2 month average. And so we are working arduously to figure out what are the things we can be doing in addition to increasing in-person learning to support and close these gaps that continue to grow. In terms of COVID updates, we are now running the BINACs asymptomatic testing across schools. We have 4 schools in person. Then we did it with the access testing at Calcut these last 2 weeks, and will at the high school next year, as well as athletics at the high school. So we have administered over 1,200 tests at this point internally, and have only had 7 student positives and 1 adult of these asymptomatic COVID tests. So it is a layer of protection that we're grateful to have, and is helping us to know when students do need to be quarantined, but we're asymptomatic. We continue to have great access to Rido and the Ed Operations Center for support and guidance. The protocols are ever changing. I know there was a lot of public comment about schools having different protocols. I can certainly look into that, but I think what's more happening is that the protocols change almost weekly. And so it may seem that they're different, but we do have an appointed team member at the district team who is supporting all 6 schools with implementing these ever shifting changes, and are grateful for that leadership. And then finally, I just want to thank the city again, especially Mayor Rivera. As of this weekend, we have 69% of our employees will have had at least the first vaccine. And that is just incredible. We cannot thank the city enough for seeing us as part of the community and part of the CF family. We certainly we'll just take that and pay it forward into our students as we can be in person with them more and more. And that is my update for tonight.
Any questions for the superintendent? Comments?
I do, and I know we usually don't respond to public comments, so I'm not going to do that, but there were some comments that were very direct and poignant, and many accusations of mismanagement, or however people want to describe it. I think that if not tonight, because it's not appropriate and you deserve the time to respond to it, Dr. Toledo, I think I would like you to find some way, whether it's at the next board meeting or with us, to let's just have a conversation. I think it's really, it's heartbreaking, right? To hear these things, whether, and if they're not true, to have people believe them, whatever it is. I appreciate what you bring to us and how open you have been with us and all the work that we've been doing. And it's not necessarily a question or a comment, and I don't need to put you on the spot or anyone else, but those comments were not fun to listen to. And I don't think they were supposed to be that way.
I'm happy to share at any point right now or next meeting. I did meet with most of the people who gave public comment tonight one-on-one earlier this week to hear their concerns. So nothing was new tonight to me, but we have different perspectives on whether the testing and treatment site can coexist with the middle school.
Can you tell us about what you're hearing from parents?
I can tell you
Is it
that
silence? Because I heard that parents are scared to talk to us, but are you hearing
so I sent a
feedback?
We have this actually you had it in your board packet, a summary of our new family communication platform, Kinvo, and so while I didn't get to go into it while trying to keep my comments short, I can give a perfect example of how Kinvo was really helpful. So Dr. Alexander Scott herself actually wrote a letter talking about the safety of the Calcut testing and treatment site. And I was able, once we translated the letter, to send that through Kinvo to every family at Calcut. And it was a two-way communication. I can tell you that 100% of the responses I received back were positive and understanding of the two coexisting. So while I still am certainly open to the possibility that families are telling teachers something different. I have not heard from one family at Calcut that is concerned, nor has Principal Ferranti.
Yeah, and I would encourage teachers who are hearing from their parents, from parents of kids in their classroom, that they're scared to talk to us. To y'all know how to contact us, because I've received many emails about a number of things, and so like my email hasn't changed. You know how to reach the superintendent. Like, tell those parents to reach out to us if you're hearing from them, or connect us to them. We're not hiding the ball here. I think there was a lot of, and again, I don't want to go down the whole of sort of trying to defend us, because it's not the place, it's not appropriate. But there was a lot of sort of, there's a lack of good faith, right? Like, I think there's a lack of trust that's being expressed. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. And so again, I have an email that I know everyone has access to, because I've received multiple emails from many of the people who spoke, and I welcome you every single time when you speak in public, and also if you reach out to me separately via email, and just know that stands. And I'm sure that that's true for other board members as well. I forgot to, I won't read this out loud again because public comment is closed, but I will forward to other board members an email I got from a parent. I just saw it now. It was shortly before the meeting started. It was from Ashley Bro, who usually comes to the meeting. My guess is that she was unable to. It seems like it was only sent to me, but I'll forward it to you all so you can read it for yourself. I haven't had a chance to read through it, so I don't want to inappropriately convey her message, but just an FYI that there's another sort of correspondence from a parent that I got via email. Any other questions? Oh, actually, Dr. Toledo, can you walk us through the timeline for starting to bring kiddos back? I know that we talked about it briefly last meeting, but could you just quickly remind us?
Sure, and the short answer is every school does have a unique plan, because so much of increasing in-person learning has to do with family preference and staffing. So the reality is not every school can do exactly the same thing. We did use the week after February break, so February 22nd, as sort of a starting point for the phase-in, again, because that was 6 weeks from when we started getting people vaccinated. And so for many people, they will hit peak immunity. And of course, that happens in waves. But as an example, Calcut will probably start with 4 classrooms, 4 or 5 classrooms that very first week. And so it will happen gradually. And again, while principals have very strong drafts, a lot of this hinges on staffing. And so simultaneously, HR is working with anyone who had accommodations to learn. Obviously a medical accommodation would stand, but for many, getting the vaccine actually then changes the medical, and there's no longer a need for a medical accommodation. So we're working through each of those unique situations. And then that tells us the full staffing capability of any given school, and therefore how many students additionally can come in. So it's definitely a puzzle, one we're working on every day, but very excited that we'll be able to gradually be seeing more and more of our students in person, and hopefully for more and more days a week.
Sorry, I was muted. All right, anyone else have any questions of Dr. Toledo? Seeing none. The next item, I believe, is board comments. Give me 1 second. Yes, the next item is board comments. Andrew.
Thank you. Superintendent, for the next meeting, I was wondering if you could provide an update on, well, let me back up. Yeah, obviously, I'm concerned about learning loss and for students. And I think it would be really useful for this board to hear what the options, procedures, and scenarios are for families that want to consider having their child repeat the current grade that they're in. What type of grade retention options there are for parents to make that decision, to understand what their options are and to know what that process would look like. I think it would be helpful for this board to have an update about what those scenarios could look like.
Will do.
Anything else before we adjourn? All right, well, thank you, everyone. It is 8:05. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Brian Estrada, seconded by Hugo Figueroa, I think.
Second.
Oh, seconded by, who was it, Sonia or?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, sorry, seconded by Hugo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? None. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.